Welcome to Leading with Purpose, Harnessing the Power of Mindsets and Behaviors for Success podcast. In today's podcast, we'll be talking about why year-end performance reviews typically tend to go south. There are several factors that contribute to this problem. One is that employees may feel anxious or stressed about the review process, especially if they're unsure of how they will be evaluated or if they will receive a raise or promotion. Additionally, managers may feel overwhelmed with the amount of work that goes into preparing for and conducting the review, which can lead to rushed or superficial evaluations. This can create a sense of frustration or resentment on both sides, which can make the review feel more like a confrontation than a constructive conversation. There are several steps that can be taken to improve the year-end performance review process. One is to clearly communicate the purpose and expectations of the review beforehand, so that employees know what to expect and can prepare accordingly. It can also be helpful to involve the employees in the process by giving them an opportunity to self-assess and provide input on their own performance. Finally, it is important to focus on ongoing feedback and development throughout the year, rather than waiting until the year end to address any issues or concerns. This can help to create a more positive and productive review process that benefits both employees and managers. Managers and employees alike can botch the entire process if they're not careful. Performance reviews should be a time to reflect on accomplishments, set goals for the future, and identify any areas of improvement. But all too often, these reviews turn into shouting matches or long-winded arguments. Here is a short list of a few items that can derail a performance review. Being defensive when receiving feedback, making promises you can't keep, focusing on the negatives instead of the positives, not being prepared for the review, not being respectful to your manager. Now let's take one example and discuss it further, being defensive when receiving feedback. When you're receiving feedback, it's important to be open-minded and listen to what your manager has to say. If you're defensive, you're not going to learn anything from the review, and it will only damage your relationship with your manager. There are a few things you can do to avoid being defensive. Listen carefully to what your manager has to say. Don't interrupt. Avoid getting defensive or argumentative. Take time to process the feedback before responding. Ask questions if you don't understand something. And finally, thank your manager for their time and feedback. If you're a manager, be clear and concise in your feedback. Avoid giving criticism that is vague or overly negative. And if you're providing negative feedback, ensure you have evidence to support it. Always be sure to focus on the positives as well as the areas of improvement. Also, avoid making any promises you can't keep, such as promotions or raises. And if you can't deliver on what you've promised, you will only damage your relationship with your employees. So here's an important message for managers. The performance discussion should be fact-based. Start with the business objectives and results that were committed to at the start of the year. Use the business objectives and results as a guide for the discussion. Balance the feedback. Identify areas of strengths and opportunities for improvement. And for any opportunities for improvement, provide evidence and facts. Tie it back to the agreed-to business objectives. Ideally, the performance review should not surprise the employees, as you should have been providing feedback throughout the year. In the event any allegations towards the employees will be made, such as, no one likes you, you're lazy, you don't roll up your sleeves, you talk too much, you ask too many questions, you don't do what you're told, etc., you should engage HR and ensure you have clearance to make those allegations. And finally, ensure you provide accurate and detailed meeting minutes. If you're an employee, be prepared. Be prepared to discuss your accomplishments and goals for the future. Avoid getting defensive if you receive criticism. Instead, try to see it as constructive feedback that can help you improve. And above all, be respectful of your manager's time and opinions, as well as the process. So here's some important messages for the employees. We all know that most managers are struggling to stay afloat. Rather than expect them to book bi-weekly or monthly meetings to provide and receive feedback, you should go ahead and book them yourselves. You also have an obligation. This is not a one-way street. Both you and your manager have an obligation to ensure that both of you are doing what you need to ensure each of you are successful. Ensure the meetings center on agreed to business objectives and the expected results. So at times we tend to have meetings, but the meetings get derailed with side or tangential discussions versus focusing on the real business objectives. If you did not receive any feedback or you received minimal feedback throughout the year, be prepared to be surprised. Know that managers are under pressure to fill a quota. They can't all have star performers. They need to balance between star, mid, and low performers. And just as an FYI, chances are most managers are going to go with the mid performers. Because if you have somebody you want to flag as a star, then the senior management will ask for a business justification. If you have somebody that's a low performer, then the senior management will ask the manager to show all the paperwork, all the meetings, all the improvement plan, all the discussions that took place before this employee was flagged as a low performer. So to avoid doing all the extra work, managers will usually go right in the middle and select a mid performer. Understand that managers will gravitate to the mid performers as this requires, as I said, less paperwork. So be prepared in your weekly, bi-weekly, monthly meetings. Any highlights that you've achieved in the projects that you've worked on, anything that you've done to go above and beyond, any accolades that you've received from your peers, from your customers, share that with your manager so that the manager is constantly aware of what you're doing. And what that will allow is for the manager to communicate on a regular basis with his or her peer managers and the senior executives in terms of the progress you're making and how you're differentiating from your peers and the value that you're adding. So when you are presented as a star performer at the end of the year, there's no surprise because all the pieces have already been lined up. Also, when you enter the meeting and it does not go as expected, just take the feedback. Ask if there's any supporting evidence, facts, so that you can review it and then exit the meeting. Asking for time to digest the discussion and have a proper response back will allow you to get past any negative emotions and focus more on the facts and a logical way forward. And finally, ensure you document every word and capture it as meeting minutes so that now you have evidence of what was said, what was discussed, etc. So, with a little preparation and thoughtfulness, the year-end performance review can be a productive and positive experience for both managers and employees. By following these steps, you can help to ensure that your review goes smoothly and is productive for everyone involved.